Picture the last football game you watched. The stadium, the perfectly lined pitch, the referees in their uniforms, the players in their numbered shirts, the whistle, the clock, the rules. Now forget all of it, because the first football game looked nothing like that. And the story of how it got from there to here is one of the strangest, most violent, most surprisingly human journeys in the history of sport. Go back far enough, and the game does not have a name. It does not have a pitch. It does not have teams of 11. What it has is a round object and a group of people who cannot stop kicking it. That instinct, to propel something with your foot, to compete, to chase, turns out to be almost embarrassingly old. The earliest documented evidence of a game involving a ball kicked with the foot comes from China. The game was called kuju. Kuju translates roughly as kickball. And according to historian Pu Jiang and records compiled by the Chinese Football Association, the game was being played as far back as 476 BC during the Warring States period. It was not casual play. It was structured. It was competitive. It was played at the imperial court and military training grounds, where soldiers used it to build stamina and agility. The ball was made of leather stuffed with feathers and hair. The goal was a hole in a piece of silk net stretched between two bamboo poles. And the rules, depending on the version played, could be strict or almost non-existent. Think about what that means for a moment. Over 2,500 years ago, on the other side of the world from where you are sitting right now, people were playing something that your brain would immediately recognize as football. Not exactly football, but football's ancestor. Football's ghost. Meanwhile, in ancient Greece, a similar game called episkiros was being played. The Roman historian Athenaeus described it in detail. Teams. Two sides. A ball. An attempt to get the ball past the opposing team. Episkiros was fast and physical. It allowed use of the hands as well as the feet, which makes it something between football and rugby by modern standards. But the impulse was identical. Two groups of people. One ball. A boundary. A winner. The Romans picked it up. They called their version harpastum. And here is where it starts to get interesting, because harpastum was not a gentle pastime. Roman soldiers played it as part of combat training. It was used to develop speed, strength, and strategic thinking. Julius Caesar reportedly encouraged it among his troops. The game was fast, compact, and often brutal. Players collided. They tackled. They pushed. There were no apologies. The ball was small and hard. The field was whatever ground was available. The goal was to maintain possession and advance. Now here is the part that most history books skip over. When the Roman legions expanded across Europe, into Gaul, into Britannia, into what would eventually become England, they brought harpastum with them. And something happened when that game met the local populations of the British Isles, something that would take centuries to fully resolve itself. The game mutated. It absorbed local customs, local aggression, and local chaos. And it became something that barely resembles sport at all. Medieval folk football. This is what football looked like for most of its history. And it was, by almost any modern standard, absolutely terrifying. Historian Francis Peabody Magowan, who spent decades studying the origins of football at Harvard University, documented accounts of medieval folk football across England dating back to the 12th century. These games were played between villages. Entire villages. Not 11 players aside. Hundreds of players aside. Sometimes the entire male population of two towns would turn out. The pitch was not a rectangle with lines. It was the space between the two towns. Fields. Rivers. Streets. The market square. Whatever was in between. The goal was to get the ball to a specific point in the opposing town. There were almost no rules. You could kick it. You could carry it. You could punch it. You could do almost anything to stop the person carrying it. People were injured regularly. People were occasionally killed. The game went on for hours. Sometimes all day. Sometimes across multiple days. Shops were boarded up when the game was scheduled. Windows were shuttered. Authorities despised it. King Edward II banned it in 1314, describing it as a game in which there is great noise and hubbub. King Edward III banned it. King Henry IV banned it. The bans were largely ignored. Because here is what the bans could not account for. The people playing did not experience the game as chaos. They experienced it as community, as tradition, as the one day of the year when the boundaries between classes, between streets, between neighboring towns dissolved into a single shared contest. Football was not just a game. It was a ritual. It encoded something deep about human belonging and competition that no royal decree could erase. This is what historian Alan Gutman at Amherst College identified as one of the defining features of pre-modern sport. It was inseparable from its social context. The game did not exist apart from the community that played it. The rules were the community's rules. The field was the community's field. The violence was the community's violence, contained and understood within shared custom. And then the 19th century arrived, and everything changed. The English public schools took folk football and began, very slowly and very deliberately, to civilize it. Boys at Eton played one version. Boys at Rugby played another. Boys at Harrow played yet another. Each school had its own rules. Each school had its own version of what the game was supposed to look like. And when those boys went to university, when they tried to play against each other, chaos broke out. Not the folk football kind of chaos, but a new kind. The kind that comes from two groups of people who both believe they know the rules playing the same game and discovering that they do not agree on a single one. Something had to be formalized. In 1863, a group of clubs and schools met in a pub called the Freemasons' Tavern in London. They argued. They debated. They split. The ones who wanted to allow carrying the ball and hacking at opponents' legs walked out and eventually formed rugby. The ones who stayed agreed on a set of rules that prohibited carrying the ball and abolished deliberate hacking. They called their organization the Football Association. They wrote down the laws of the game. And from that pub, in that argument, the modern game was born. In 13 rules, centuries of kicking, carrying, chasing, rioting, playing, and competing were distilled into something recognizable, repeatable, and exportable. British sailors and merchants and engineers carried the game across the world. It took root in South America, in Europe, in Africa, in Asia. It found Kuju's descendants in China and recognized something familiar. It spread with a speed that no other sport has ever matched. Today, more than 4 billion people call themselves football fans. The FIFA World Cup is the most watched sporting event in human history. And somewhere underneath all of that, underneath the billion-dollar clubs, the televised drama, the transfer fees, and the tactical formations, there is still a round object and a group of people who cannot stop kicking it. That instinct did not begin with the Football Association in 1863. It did not begin with the English public schools. It did not begin with the Roman legions or the Greek city-states. It began somewhere older than any of those. It began the first time a human being found something round on the ground and decided, for no particularly logical reason, to kick it. The next time you watch a game, you are not just watching football. You are watching 2,500 years of human beings figuring out what it means to compete, to belong, to run towards something together. The pitch is different now. The boots are different. The rules are written down. But the thing underneath all of it, that low, electric pull toward the ball, that has never changed. And something tells you it never will.